Welcome back. In the previous video, we have seen what logic is. We have understood the difference between propositions, sentences. We know now what arguments are, how to recognize arguments, and the difference between arguments and explanations. Now, let us try to understand the difference between deductive and inductive arguments. Consider the following example. All humans are mortal. Socrates is human. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Again, if the Queen lives in Buckingham Palace, then she lives in London. The Queen does live in Buckingham Palace, so the Queen lives in London. In both the examples, we have seen that the premises succeeded in providing conclusive grounds for the truth of the conclusion. So we can say they were valid arguments. Now, this term validity or invalidity applies only to deductive arguments. So, those were deductive arguments, and we can say that a deductive argument is valid when its premises, if true, do provide conclusive grounds for the truth of its conclusion. So, in a deductive argument, premises and conclusions are so related that it is impossible for the premises to be true unless the conclusion is also true. What about inductive arguments? Inductive arguments are not valid or invalid in the sense in which these terms are applied to deductive arguments. So an inductive argument makes a very different claim. Not that its premises give conclusive grounds for the truth of its conclusion, but only that its premises provide some support for that conclusion. So just see this example. Polls show that 75% of the Republicans favor a school prayer amendment. Joe is a Republican. Therefore, Joe probably favors a school. This word probably is very important because this is the key word which shows that this is not a deductive but an inductive argument, and we cannot simply conclude whether this argument is valid or invalid. We can simply say that it is probable, less probable, or more probable. Check out the other inductive argument. The bank safe was robbed last night. Whoever robbed the safe knew the safe's combination. Only two people know the safe's combination, Lefty and Bugsy. Bugsy needed money to pay his gambling debts. Bugsy was seen sneaking around outside the bank last night. It is reasonable to conclude, therefore, that Bugsy robbed the safe. Now, all the previous 5 statements are premises to the last statement, which we can say is the conclusion. But the conclusion is not conclusive in the sense of deduction. That is, we cannot be sure that Bugsy robbed the safe. It is highly possible, at least it's probable, that Lefty robbed it, or maybe somebody else. So this is the difference between inductive and deductive, because in inductive argument there is no surety but only probability. So here are some deduction indicator words which will show us that it is a deductive argument. Certainly, definitely, absolutely, conclusively, it logically follows that. It is logical to conclude that. This logically implies that. This entails that. On the other hand, induction indicator words will be probably, likely. It is plausible to suppose that. It is reasonable to assume that. One would expect that. it is a good bet that, chances are that, odds are that. So an inductive generalization is an argument in which generalization is claimed to be probably true based on the information about some members of a particular class. For example, all dinosaur bones so far discovered have been more than 65 million years old. Therefore, probably all dinosaur bones are more than 65 million years old. Here's another one. 8 months ago, I met a doctor from Perth and he was friendly. 5 months ago, I met a car mechanic from Perth and he was friendly. 3 months ago, I met a waitress from Perth and she was friendly. I guess most people from Perth are friendly. Here's one last example of inductive reasoning. It has rained in Toronto every February since weather records have been kept. Therefore, it will probably rain in Toronto next February. Now let us summarize the three basic differences between deductive and inductive arguments. Number one, deductive arguments are either valid or invalid. Inductive arguments are more probable or less probable. Number two, deductive arguments move from general to particular, that is, from all mortals to Socrates. But inductive arguments move from particular to general. For example, Socrates is a human and mortal, Plato is a human and mortal, Aristotle is a human and mortal. Therefore, in all probability, all humans are mortals. Number three, in deductive arguments, the premises provide conclusive grounds for the conclusion, but in inductive argument, the premises do not provide conclusive grounds for the conclusion. Okay? Now, what is validity? It is important to understand that validity can never apply to a proposition. Truth applies to a proposition, but validity applies to a set of propositions which forms an argument. So a deductive argument is valid when it succeeds in linking with logical necessity the conclusion to its premises. Its validity refers to the relation between its propositions, between the set of propositions that serve as the premises and the one proposition which serve as the conclusion of that argument. If the conclusion follows logically from the premises, we can say that the argument is valid. Therefore, validity can never apply to any proposition by itself because the needed relation cannot be found within any one proposition. Some valid arguments can have false conclusion, but then any such argument should have at least one false argument. We are going to study rules of validity and the different types of fallacies in a different chapter. So what then is truth? Truth and falsehood are attributes of individual propositions. A single statement that serves as a premise in an argument may be true. The statement that serves as its conclusion may be false. This conclusion may have been validly inferred in the structure of an argument, but that particular proposition may have been false. That is not true. So, in itself, truth is an attribute of those propositions that assert what really is the case. When I assert that Lake Superior is the largest of the 5 Great Lakes, I assert that what really is the case is true. And how do we define soundness? When it has both the properties of validity as well as truth. That is, the premises are true and the argument as a structure, it is also valid. When both the things are there present, then the argument is described as a sound argument. I hope you have understood deductive and inductive arguments and the concepts of validity, truth, and soundness of arguments. Okay, so that's all for now. I hope you have understood. Here is a set of question and answers which you can download and practice at home. In the next session, we are going to learn how to represent arguments with the help of diagrams and how to paraphrase them. So don't miss out. Stay tuned. Goodbye.